The first time I walked into the back of Cold and Crisp Deli that morning, the smell of frozen meats and leftover cleaning chemicals hit me like a punch. There were no customers yet, no clatter of dishes, no smell of fresh bread. Just the hum of refrigerators and that eerie, sterile chill that made your breath fog in the air. It was supposed to be a routine call, another tragic accident, according to the dispatcher. Restaurant worker trapped in the walk-in freezer. Probably fell asleep after closing, the voice had said. But something about the tone didn't sit right. There was a hesitancy in how it was phrased, a subtle uncertainty that suggested someone wasn't telling the whole story. When the doors swung open, the first thing I noticed was the frost. Thick, white frost covering the metal shelving, the boxes of frozen peas, and even the floor tiles. And then, the body. She was sprawled awkwardly on the cold concrete, her uniform stiff with frost, her hair frozen to the collar. Her name was Clara Dawson, 24, part-time at Cold and Crisp for 3 years. The last thing she'd done, according to her manager, was check the deliveries and stock the walk-in freezer before locking up at 10:15 p.m. They said she must have fallen asleep, overwhelmed by exhaustion, and succumbed to the cold. But something about the scene didn't add up. The freezer itself was a high-end, commercial model, maintained meticulously, designed to keep temperatures at a steady -18 degrees Celsius. The walls were insulated, the alarm system functional, and the doors sealed with automatic locks that required manual release from the inside or a key from the outside. Yet, the door had been closed, and no one reported any malfunctions. I started with the obvious, the temperature log. Every modern walk-in freezer has one, a digital record that stores the temperature every 15 minutes. The log for last night showed the room temperature dropping gradually after 10 p.m., as it should. But at 10:27 p.m., there was a sudden spike, 5 minutes of the freezer warming to -2 degrees Celsius before snapping back down to -18 degrees Celsius. That kind of fluctuation shouldn't happen in a properly functioning freezer, and it certainly wasn't something that could occur by accident if the door had been properly sealed. I knelt by Clara's body, examining the frost patterns on her coat and the tips of her hair. The frost wasn't uniform, it was heavier on her left side, as if she had been pressed against the back wall, and yet the door had been shut from the outside. If she'd simply fallen asleep, she would have frozen more evenly. The frost pattern suggested movement, struggle even, but there was no sign of bruises or cuts on her skin. That didn't make sense. Interviewing the staff yielded the usual sympathetic responses. "It's just terrible," the manager said, his voice tight. "She was so careful, always checked everything twice. Must have gotten trapped by accident. Happens sometimes." I noticed the nervous glance he shot toward the assistant manager, who nodded quickly, almost too quickly. There was fear in their eyes, a kind of panic that didn't belong in someone who'd simply lost a worker to a tragic accident. The security footage was the next step, and it was here that things started to look strange. The cameras didn't capture the inside of the freezer, for obvious reasons, but the hallway leading to it was visible. The last footage of Clara shows her walking toward the freezer at 10:18 p.m., holding a clipboard. She opens the door, disappears inside, and then, there's a flicker on the timestamp. The next frame shows the door closed again, but the clip jumps ahead by 10 minutes. Whoever edited or paused the recording did it perfectly. It wasn't a glitch. I checked the timestamps against the temperature log. The spike at 10:27 p.m. coincides almost exactly with the missing footage. Someone was inside the freezer with Clara. The staff all claimed they were nowhere near the back area. The night janitor said he had already left by 10 p.m., the cook was washing dishes in the front, and the assistant manager insisted she was counting the cash register. But the freezer is a confined space. Whoever manipulated the door, whoever caused that spike in temperature, had to be physically present. I moved on to the physical mechanics of the freezer. The door handle was pristine, showing no signs of forced entry. There was no sign of the emergency release lever being triggered from inside, and the key lock on the outside had its standard wear marks, nothing unusual. Whoever orchestrated this knew exactly how to manipulate the system. Then there was the most chilling part, the temperature spike itself. A rise from -18 degrees Celsius to -2 degrees Celsius in 5 minutes isn't random. The freezer doesn't work that way. It suggested tampering, a brief override, most likely electronic, to temporarily disable the cooling system. And if that's true, then this wasn't a simple accident at all. I looked again at Clara's frozen face. She wasn't just dead, she was frozen, preserved in the moment of terror. Her eyes were open, staring blankly at the ceiling tiles. She'd known something was wrong, and she'd had no time to react. Outside the freezer, the staff were still talking in low voices. Each word, each gesture, was a potential clue. Everyone says it was a tragic mistake, they said. But the evidence, the temperature log, the frost patterns, the missing security footage, was telling a different story. And I knew, before I even started the full investigation, that this story wouldn't end with an accident. Someone had planned this. Someone had turned a walk-in freezer into a trap. I made a note in my case file. Check electronic override system. Investigate all staff access. Reconstruct freezer timeline down to the minute. As I walked back to the front of the restaurant to question the manager further, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. This was no longer about a tragic mistake. It was about control. And someone had been in control last night, someone who wanted Clara Dawson dead. I glanced at the temperature log again, staring at that spike over and over. It was mocking me, daring me to prove what I already suspected. And I knew that when I uncovered the truth, it would shatter the image of that quiet, unsuspecting restaurant forever. But first, I had to figure out exactly how someone could manipulate a walk-in freezer without leaving a trace. And that's when I realized the temperature log wasn't the only thing that lied. The walk-in freezer had been silent for almost 12 hours now, but its secrets were starting to speak. I stood there, staring at Clara Dawson's frozen body one last time before the coroner's team arrived. Something had bothered me all along, the spike in the temperature log. That anomaly was the thread that, if pulled, would unravel the whole story. I returned to the electronic control panel for the freezer. The override system was supposed to be locked, accessible only with a special code issued to the manager. But when I ran a digital sweep, I discovered something unexpected, a remote access log. Someone had entered the system using the manager's credentials, but not from the control panel. From a personal tablet. And that tablet was missing. Questions ran through my mind as I moved back to the staff room. Who had the tablet last? According to the daily check-in, the assistant manager, Rachel, had borrowed it to verify the inventory. She claimed she had returned it before leaving. But the system log said otherwise. The tablet was active at 10:26 p.m., 1 minute before the spike in the freezer's temperature. I went back to the freezer, retracing Clara's last steps. The frost patterns told me a story I had overlooked. The heaviest frost on her left side indicated that she had tried to step back from someone who had pressed her toward the wall. There were no bruises because she had been immobilized quickly by the extreme cold. The spike in temperature wasn't meant to kill her instantly. It was a calculated torture, designed to confuse investigators into thinking it was an accident. I asked the manager to step into the staff room while I examined the surveillance tapes again. I noticed something subtle, the reflection of a figure moving behind the counter in the security footage just before the freeze. It was Rachel. She appeared to check the freezer door, then lingered suspiciously as the timestamp flickered. I confronted her in the staff room, calm but firm. The tablet, I said, and the override log. You're the only one who could have accessed it at that exact time. You knew how to manipulate the freezer. Her face went pale, but she tried to laugh it off. You don't understand, it was an accident. I didn't mean. An accident? I repeated, stepping closer. Clara didn't fall asleep. The temperature spike, the frost patterns, the missing footage, this was controlled. You trapped her in there. She broke down then, tears streaming, but the confession was chilling in its clarity. Clara had discovered Rachel stealing inventory and reporting false deliveries to cover it up. She threatened to report her to the district manager. And in a panic, Rachel had done something horrifying. She remotely disabled the freezer's cooling system temporarily, knowing it would disorient Clara, trap her, and make it look like an accident. The plan worked almost perfectly. I called the coroner and the local authorities to finalize the arrest. Rachel didn't resist. The weight of her own guilt had frozen her in place long before the authorities arrived. The freezer door, which had once seemed like a vault of ice and mystery, now felt like a silent witness to a deliberate act of murder. The restaurant would never be the same. Employees whispered about Clara's death in the hallways, each telling their own version of what happened, but the truth was in the logs, in the frost, in the seconds that someone had manipulated technology to commit murder. As I left the restaurant that night, I couldn't shake the image of Clara's frozen face. It was a reminder that sometimes the most controlled environments could hide the most dangerous secrets. And then I remembered the missing tablet. Despite Rachel's confession, no one had found it. Whoever had it could still access the system. Someone out there could tamper with another freezer. Another life could be at risk. The case was closed, but the danger wasn't gone. Silent evidence files. Sometimes the evidence doesn't just lie, it screams. Do you think someone else could still be controlling the freezer? Watch the next story to see how hidden devices are used to commit crimes we think are accidents.